Medicine burns when touched by fire. The smoke curls and spirals upward, and plumes of it rising, swirling, and pushing themselves in ribbons, higher and higher until the smell of it becomes the ancient aroma of blessing, teaching, and communion. Within its fragrant cloud, you can feel peace descend upon you. There is spirit here. You can feel it if you allow it. And that is the heart of the teaching, the allowing. Welcome to the Urban Grief Shamans. Grief protests and stirs within us a profound defiance against living a life filled with numbness. It emboldens wildness, and like a thunderstorm, untamed. And as we learn, grief is the prime emotion for the soul's vitality. Contrary to common belief, grief is teeming with life. It resists being gentle, and yet moves us so passionately. There can be no doubt this emotion springs forth from the wells of the soul. In our podcast, we will explore this defiance, embrace its wildness, and find peace within its untamed vitality as we live in the hustle of everyday life. Join Patricia Jones, a psychotherapist, and John Moyer, a retired paramedic, as we explore the spiritual side of grief. Welcome to another episode of the Urban Grief Shamans. I'm your host, John Moyer, and today we have a deeply insightful discussion about the shamanic skill of Psychopomp and its profound connection to the process of grief, loss, and healing. I'm joined by my guest who is a teacher, a shamanic practitioner, and a griever, Catherine Grey Hughes from Ottawa, Canada, who brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to this fascinating topic. Psychopomp is derived from the Greek word meaning soul conductor and plays a pivotal role in helping lost, confused, or stuck souls transition from their life in this world. Catherine and I share our own experiences and insight into this sacred work, shedding light on the reasons why some souls linger and the importance of guiding them on their journey. Join us as our discussion begins.
It's nice to be with you, John. I'm speaking about Psychopomp as a part of shamanism or a method or a healing method. Psychopomp is actually Greek and it means soul or conductor of souls. And so one of the aspects of the work that I do is to conduct souls, meaning that sometimes souls get lost, stuck, or confused and don't pass through from the middle world as we see it to the upper or lower world, if we want to look at it from a three-world sort of perspective. A lot of cultures do have practices where they work with souls and make sure that their passage goes smoothly. And so my experience has been that I know the helping spirits that I work with, if there wasn't a need, I wouldn't see it. And so I've always gone from my experience that I do find that there are souls, for whatever reason, for different reasons, don't leave the middle world. Sometimes they choose to stick around to help their loved ones. Sometimes they're a bit confused because they've died suddenly or have been medicated before they pass. And sometimes I've also met souls who are afraid of moving because of fear of judgment, depending on their religious background. And so sometimes you have souls who perhaps have committed suicide and are in a really tough state and are suffering and are not willing to look elsewhere in order to continue their soul's passage. And for me, it's just such beautiful work working with these souls. I've learned so much about what things hold people back when they pass, what are the things that they're thinking about when they pass, also about their care for their loved ones. That sometimes I have met souls who have chosen to stick around and not follow the call to leave this world from a soul level, even though they've left their bodies, because concerned about their grieving loved ones. And they want to stay and comfort them. And then at some level, after they've been around for a while, they lose the ability or they lose their way and are not able to pass and hear that call for their soul to go on that next part of their journey. And on some level, that can be not so helpful for the living. Yeah, right. Yeah, and it can affect you to their varying degrees. Sometimes they just want to look after you and make sure you're making good choices in your life. Or a lot of grandparents, grandparent ages or things like that are wanting to keep, they think that it's a way for them to look after their descendants. Whereas from my experiences, if they move and choose to heed the call to shift from this middle world into the upper world or lower world, that they can actually be more helpful in my mind. From my experience has been they can be more helpful as ancestors that way because they're well.
Yes.
Yeah. They receive the healing they need and the change of perspective. There's a big difference talking to spirits in the middle world who still have middle world sensibilities and issues and considerations is a bit different than when they move to the upper or lower world and they're speaking from a place of a little bit more healing because they receive healing when they go to the upper or lower world. And when I should say that when lower world, it's in no way like what some people would perceive as this hell or purgatory. It's just a different form of what a lot of people think of as heaven, or it's like the upper world and the lower world are interconnected.
Mm-hmm. It's just like
So I just want to make
topology
that
as opposed to definition.
Yeah, a lot of cultures, there are a lot of cultures that see the lower world as a beautiful place. And certainly from my journeys, that's been my experience.
Just a quick one. A friend that I was working with in EMS, her father had passed, and I guess it was 2 years later. She asked, "Can you just check on my dad to see where he is?" And I did that and found him. And after journeying to the last place that I knew where he was, which was the hospital, and there Bob was just sitting there on a bench admiring a sunset. I sat with him, looking at him. I told him, "For a dead man, you're looking really good." Bob both had a good laugh. I asked if there were any last thoughts that he wanted to pass on to his family. So tell them that I love them. I said, "That's all good, but can you give me a little bit more so they know that I was speaking with you?" And then he proceeded to give me information about keepsakes he had owned that he wanted to go to specific individuals in the family. He vanished. He was happy. So you're right that often that there's no reason to perform psychopomp.
Yeah, not all souls that stay in the middle world need help. And it's up to them. They have their own sovereignty, so we don't force anybody to go anywhere. But sometimes in the hospitals, like I've been in experiences where the hospitals have a lot of spirits hanging around, and I'm not sure that's super helpful for those that are sick in the hospital or the staff, for that matter. So I think a beautiful place for people who know how to do psychopomp to go is the hospital.
And the nursing homes.
The nursing homes. Yeah. You find people who are not necessarily aware that they've passed either. Sometimes you have to gently explain to them that they no longer have a body, and gently. And I wanted to say that's a healing in itself. That you go, John, you're talking about your friend asking you to go help ask her father. There's power and beauty in someone who still has a body, for lack of a way, still incarnate, going and checking up on somebody. Sometimes people just need to know that somebody cares.
Well,
and that's enough for them to turn around and leave.
Tie that to grief, I guess, Catherine, is it's the same for a loved one or even a pet. To know that they are well on the other side, quite helpful and healing.
I think that, for people to know that their family is at peace, I think is really helpful for them, that their family member is at peace. I think that it also, on some level, is healing for the family to know that person is receiving the care that they need in the upper or lower world and are not wandering. And for some, I have had some experiences with people who are in deep grief, where if a family member is staying around out of care or out of concern, that sometimes it makes it harder for people to move on. And not move on in a way that I want you to think to forget about the person who's passed, but that they feel they're stuck in their grief. They're having a harder time moving through the grief. I have had experiences where doing psychopomp work has really helped the person who's grieving. as you said, on the level that, yes, that now they're at peace. Sometimes there's a bit of a message that is passed between them, but also there is sometimes those who have passed can be a bit heavy, especially when there's trauma involved in that death. Sometimes hamper the living, but it doesn't come to a resolution, or it's harder to work through it, I guess, has been my experience. And this is just based on some clients that I've done work with, that to help them get to not even the next phase, more about the process of grief, but to be able to move a little bit forward in their grief and process it in a different way.
The longing, I think, is when we have a loss. It's not just that they're gone. Now that they have this deep longing. And I think they don't think of that there's a middle through Psychopomp to meet up with their almost a mediumship, if I may say, is that, that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It does, like during Psychopomp work does involve mediumship to varying degrees. Typically when I'm doing Psychopomp work, I'm not looking for evidence so much of who the person is or how they passed. I'm looking for a resolution of healing for them and transferring them to a place where they can get the healing they need. A lot of spirits, when they pass that are in the middle world, are very confused and they're in a dream thing. So a lot of the ones that are really confused are not necessarily the best communicators in that way. When they're in the middle world, they have not gone to that place of healing. So some of the messages they pass may not be from the most healed state. Sometimes they're worried about their belongings or things like that. Well, I've witnessed that in mediumship and other things, is that sometimes they're more concerned about middle world experiences or issues of wills or issues of business transactions or family dynamics and those sorts of things. And sometimes that might not be as helpful as if receiving messages from someone who has crossed completely. I do have some anecdotal experience from clients where they keep hoping that their loved one will come to them in their dreams. And what I find is that if a spirit is in the middle world, they're less likely to come into the dream state of the client or the individual, the grieving individual. But if they go up to the upper world or the lower world and they're coming from that state, it's often not that long after where they will show up in the person's dreams and let them know that they're okay.
My dad had passed last February, and I had no intentions of trying to look for him. I was going to give him 12 months for checking them.
Yeah.
6 months after his passing. And I was aroused from sleep, hearing my name being called. I looked around and I heard once more my name being called. I then heard my dad's voice. He said, "I made it." It's not quite the same, but reaffirming our loved ones do try to reach out, if at all possible. I think, from my experience, that's what happens. And grieving, I think, not having that knowledge that their loved ones are okay, especially if there was trauma involved. And I think if I was somebody's family and something like that happened, and you could tell a story of what you saw or what was said, and it would bring great relief to the family.
Opportunity to share a little bit more than you would otherwise. But it is it's a beautiful gift to be able to help souls. And I think it also teaches us a lot about what happens when a person dies and what are the things that they're thinking about. And I believe it helps when we are ourselves approaching death, or if we have loved ones that are approaching death, in how we can treat those people and what we can do to assist their passage. I grew up in an Anglican background. I'm not practicing anymore, but I was in a position where I was sitting with a friend of mine whose mother was dying, who was 90, and she had dementia, and it had just progressed to the point where she had stopped eating. And I was sitting with her. I considered it a big honor to sit vigil with people. And I happened to be there, and the Anglican minister had come in to issue last rites. I'm not 100% sure if it's called that in the Anglican faith. I know that it might be called something a bit different. But so the mother had been unresponsive. So when the minister came in, and a lovely man came in to speak the prayers, she started to mouth along with him. And I could see a huge weight lifted from her. And for someone who's religious in that way, some of the things that were said in that prayer about leaving your burdens behind and being prepared to move forward to the next phase of their life as a soul. And those are some of the things that we see when we do psychopomp work, is that people are worried about those who are left behind, or they're concerned about their worldly baggage, or things that they feel that they perhaps will be judged for. And I just think that what a beautiful thing that you can do, whether it's religious or otherwise, or through the work that we do, to be able to support people in helping them make that transition in a way that's unburdened.
Catherine, would you like to explain how we do the work of psychopomp healing?
Oh, yeah, no, I'd be happy to do that. Yeah, we've talked a lot about what it is. We haven't explained it, though, have we? Yeah, that'd be helpful. So Psychopomp, what it involves is a middle world journey for us, at least in this practice. There are other cultural practices who would do it differently. Sometimes I've understood that there are some different cultures that do a group ceremony to help a community member pass when they've passed, and support the soul on its journey. But in this case, what we're doing is we're doing a middle world journey, and we work with helping compassionate spirits. And we're doing a middle world journey to that soul, as you did with the woman on the side of the road. And we're going and we're having a little conversation with them and asking them if they're happy where they are, and if we can be of assistance. And we get a feel for the person and where they are and whether they need help or not. Sometimes they say, no, I don't need any help. And you say, that's great. And you leave them be. But if they're confused or they want a little bit more information, you say that you can conduct them. And then you give them a choice if they want to go up or down. And then you, through a shamanic process, you escort them. And then you drop them at the doorstep of where there'll be someone there to meet them. In the upper or lower world, there's always someone there to meet them. Don't always know who, but there's always someone. They're familial psychopomps or other beings that are, or family members that are willing to be there for the person. And then you leave them. And in my case, the way I've been taught is that we then close the opening that we've gone through to drop them off, and then we come back. And it involves often a little conversation. I don't get too involved in their life story as much as possible. Sometimes they're not able to really communicate that, depending on how confused they are. But it's really about showing care. I'm here to check up on you, and I want to make sure you're okay. For some people, especially depending on how they've passed, it's really meaningful for them. And then I just reassure them that they're not going to be judged, and that I'm confident because of my exploration. I'm confident that I'm taking them to a place where they'll be happy and they'll be able to continue their soul's path. And, it's really rewarding. It's beautiful work. Yeah.
For those inclined to do this work, there is a teaching path to become a psychopomp, correct?
Yeah.
Would you like to explain where they might be able to receive that kind of education?
Well, yeah, there are other people out there that teach variations of this work. When I was looking around, when I was trying to figure out where I wanted to study and what I wanted to do, I found the foundation, and it spoke to me. They're universal or near universal practices, things that Michael Harner witnessed and experienced, and wanted to see what were common practices among shamanic peoples for supporting the dead. And I started studying with them, and I like it because it's very respectful of the soul, and there's a completion to it, in that we are escorting the soul to a place that we know is good, that we've experienced, that we feel good in our heart. And so for me, it's that completion of the activity that's important. And that's a healing in itself. I like that we can escort them to do that work, and that's part of the practice. It's considered an advanced training in a way, but with the foundation, you only need to do basic workshop, which we call basic, but it's not really basic, but it's the way of the shaman, where you learn to journey, because you want to have strong journey skills in order to do this work, because you're going to be journeying into the middle world. one of the things I like about also the way we teach it is it's actually quite life affirming, because we do a number of journeys to explore what happens to souls when they pass, and where would you might like to go when you pass, because you do have some choice
Yes,
here.
you do.
You have some choice. What would you like your destination to look like? What would you like to experience there? And so in the preparation for doing the Psychopomp work, you learn how to explore your own passing. What would happen to you as a soul? What's possible? What happens to souls when they pass? Where do they go? What kind of healing do they receive? And all of that, I think, for some people is really helpful for them to experience it on their own, because I have a lot of people who come to workshops who have lost somebody and are grieving, and they are drawn to the work. And it, in a way, it puts their mind at ease about where their loved ones are and what they might be experiencing. But I've had some clients and students who are well into their 70s and 80s who found that work was also helpful for them to lessen their anxiety over their passing. Maybe they were religious at one time and are no longer, and are wondering what it would be like for them.
Oh, it did for me. I found the whole experience helping people that I knew, and just my own experience of exploring all those different topologies, like the upper, lower, and middle worlds. And I don't know, after those experiences, something is different. You never see the world in the same way again.
Yeah.
Are there Psychopomp work?
Well, I think if they start by learning to journey and learning to be comfortable in the spirit world a little bit more, I really think that's helpful, because you really want to have some agency. I think that I encounter some people with a lot of built-in fear about the spirit world. And so sometimes you need to work with it a little bit for a while to get more comfortable, depending on people's backgrounds, what they've been taught. I think that people have to be careful if they are having significant mental health issues. I think they have to work to see if it's a good fit for them. And that's a conversation they could have with a teacher as well about that, if it's a good fit for them. If you're in a mental or emotional crisis, I would not recommend it. Not because it's necessarily going to cause you harm, but I think you need to have some stability in your life in order to launch from there. And I do have people, you could argue if you're heavily grieving that maybe it's not the right choice, but I would disagree, because I just think that I've had people in the workshops who are in that position, and it's really been helpful for them. Yeah. I think also this work too is that when you enter into these worlds and you explore, you have access to these compassionate spirits that can help you to understand more about the challenges you have in your life. And what I find is that people walk in ordinary reality, this everyday reality, with more power and agency through this experience of working with the helping compassionate spirit, and by learning to explore the spirit worlds. You have an opportunity to learn knowledge and gain a wider perspective, which you can then bring into your ordinary life as well. So I think there are benefits. Obviously, I'm a bit biased because this is my practice.
Yeah,
right?
but it's the basic workshop kind of gives everybody who takes the program enough reference and enough experience, and if they take their time, just living it, being in it, before they move on to other more advanced workshops. It's very healing, and it's to think that everything around them is spirit. That they learn that very quickly.
Yeah. And they gain, in that situation, they gain a guardian spirit of some kind, either in animal form or in teacher form, depending on at least one that is there to help guide them and they can count on. And so there's protection in ordinary life as well as in the spirit world. And I think that's one thing that people are looking for as well, is this idea that they have these spiritual allies that have their back.
That's right.
Like that's the reason why Michael started this in the beginning, was he felt that Westerners were wandering around. He saw in shamanic cultures that people had power sources, had powerful allies of the spirit world. And he realized that in the Western world, people were wandering around without these spirit allies. And that was really the basis of how he even started this, to teach this work, to develop this program. In the beginning was for people to wander around being more ensouled and having personal power.
Can you just enlarge Michael a little bit for everybody, who he was and just the impact that he had on the shamanic community?
Michael Harner was an anthropologist, and at the time when he was working with communities, shamanic communities, the anthropologists were told not to get involved, and there was a lot of disrespect for shamans and medicine people, that somehow them talking to the spirit world was that they were crazy. And Michael was really curious and wanted to talk to them and find out a little bit more about them. He saw something different when he was working with them. And they said to him that if you want to understand what we do, you're going to have to get involved and you're going to have to practice. And so he went outside of what was normal in academic environments by getting involved and practicing with the different cultures that he was with. And then that led to him realizing that there was something really missing in Western culture and something that would benefit. And so he started exploring how to teach practices to the Westerners, but not from a cultural point of view, but more from a methodology. And so he started teaching, and the foundation was set up around 1979, and it's been going ever since. There are branches all over the world. And really the workshop that we teach, the way of the shaman, is what he developed over time. And it's basically the same workshop that he taught back then. Have Westerners understand more about what shamanic cultures were all about, and what were the benefits there, and also how could we expand our ability to heal and be more respectful of our neighbors and the planet. And, he got to know many different people in different cultures, and often he took notes or would take down those teachings. And he has a large body of knowledge at the foundation, which is a nonprofit, where they're keeping that knowledge. And sometimes what happens is, in culture, people have lost their practices. They can go to the foundation and see if they have anything written down from Michael, from his research or others. And then he returns. And it's happened where there've been practices nobody taught it to follow. And the foundation also shamans in certain cultures where that if without that financial support, they wouldn't be able to teach the practices, and they may be the last of their lineage. And so there are a number of individuals that the foundation supports in order for them to teach people in their culture, their practices. But that was a different time. And now, we have to be really careful about cultural appropriation. And we don't take it lightly at the foundation. And I certainly don't take it lightly. And so there's been a real effort over the years to make sure that if there is a cultural practice that we reference, that it's referenced and it's not taught, unless it was something that was given freely or shared freely. And so that's been something that over time has changed with the foundation as well. But Michael's legacy, some would argue that he reintroduced shamanism to the West to a larger audience, and has led to a resurgence of interest in shamanism throughout the world. And hopefully, I hope, more respect for those practices in cultures from a Western point of view, to be offering more respect. Yeah.
Yeah. And an extension to that would be more respect for all that's living, all that is. And we certainly need to have an earth view perspective now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. If you've engaged in journey to a tree or danced a tree, you're less likely to think, you're going to think twice before you cut it down for aesthetic reasons and for pulp and paper. Or if you've journeyed to the river and found out what its needs are, you're going to hopefully treat that river with different kind of respect than perhaps I speak for myself from a Western point of view of how we've been raised. I certainly know when I was not raised with this type of worldview.
As a kid, and I find that for me, what the shamanism has taught me is that the need to love oneself greatly. And when you can do that, then it makes it so much easier to love other things just as greatly, even though you don't know them or know what it is. But that respect and love and caring goes out, and compassion goes out to all things.
Yeah, to the best of your ability, we're still human and unfortunate. For me, it's like the Western habits die hard. And so it's an incremental. I find that often our inner life changes faster than our outer life. And so some of the things that you'd like to make changes, you've seen the light in a way, you've learned something, but then becomes the action of how do you shape your consumerism or your way of walking in this world in order to match what you've learned. And that for me, it's been a challenge.
But there has been change though, Catherine.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I'm very cognizant of the lack of perfection in it, that we do our best. We do our best. It's, when you know better, you do better.
That's right.
My Aunt Lou always said that when you know better, you do better. And it's just a constant sort of growth in it. When you know better, you do better.
Let's leave it at that note. And I'd just like to say that a lot of what Catherine has referenced, as well as if you'd like to get in touch with her later on, check the show notes, and all that information that you'll probably be looking for will be in the show notes that will follow this podcast. Any last words, Catherine? You did pretty well so far.
Thank you. It's a huge topic. And I think what I'd like to leave with is that I do feel that it is better for the living, for our ancestors to be at peace wherever they are. That I think that is something that is beneficial for your descendants. So whatever you can do to be at peace, whatever you can do to help your ancestors who've passed to be at peace, I think is well worth the effort.
I couldn't agree more. Grief is a heavy burden to bear and can often feel isolating and overwhelming. That's where grief circles come in, offering a supportive and understanding community to those who are grieving. You can't be both the griever and the container of your grief. This is the purpose of grief circles, to be the holder and the witness to your pain. Your soul wants you to speak of your grief, to express your pain, your loss, and to share your history and stories of that which has been taken. The Urban Grief Shamans podcast is an offshoot of Soulful Sorrows, a grief tending website. Here, under the service menu, you will find our monthly circles. Please take the time to take a look and book into one or more of these monthly circles. Thank you for joining us into the world of shamanism and its connection to grief, healing, and spiritual growth. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe to the Urban Grief Shamans so you never miss an episode. And if you have any questions or would like to explore this topic further, please reach out to us. Your comments and support mean the world to us. Until next time, may you find grace and insight into your own spiritual journey.